Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, stocks around the world are heading for fresh records. There is optimism that this morning's inflation report will not undermine the case for interest rate cuts from the Federal Reserve. Bloomberg's Michael McKee has more on the consumer price data coming for the month of April.
There's some nervousness on Wall Street after yesterday's hot producer price index. Will consumer price increases start slowing again? The forecast is for the annual core rate to fall. How much may depend on housing. Economists and Fed officials have been waiting for this inflation Godot to show up. It represents about a third of the overall CPI index. Fed Chair Powell yesterday suggested it's about time for rent and house prices to cool. If that happens, it may have a major impact on the Fed's thinking about rate cuts. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Michael, thanks. Well, it's also a busy morning for politics. It was a primary election day in Maryland, West Virginia, and Nebraska. And one race in particular could determine control of the Senate in November. Angela Alsobrooks defeated one of the richest members of Congress, David Schroen, in Maryland's Democratic Senate primary. Alsobrooks won with 54% of the vote to Schroen's 41.9%. She'll face former Republican Governor Larry Hogan in November.
You know, they said the Hogan brand of politics was dead. Well, once again, we proved them wrong tonight.
And Larry Hogan is a critic of former President Trump and is expected to be competitive against Alsobrooks. She'd be Maryland's first black senator if elected.
In West Virginia, Karen, Republican Governor Jim Justice won the primary for retiring Democrat Joe Manchin's Senate seat with 61.9% of the vote. Justice is heavily favored to win in November. A couple of candidates with ties to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol lost their races. Derek Evans, a former West Virginia state representative who served 3 months in prison for taking part in the riot. He lost a primary challenge to Republican Congresswoman Carol Miller. Evans took just 37% of the vote to Miller's 63%. Former U.S. Capitol Police officer Harry Dunn fell short to Maryland State Senator Sarah Elfreth in a crowded Democratic primary for the state's 3rd congressional district. Elfreth took 35.4% of the vote to Dunn's 24.9%. And in Nebraska, Senator Pete Ricketts won a Republican special primary to fill the rest of Ben Sass's term. He took 79.1% of the vote and will face Democrat Preston Love Jr. in November.
Well, Nathan, now to the latest developments in the hush money trial of Donald Trump. The defense has been grilling the prosecution's star witness, Michael Cohen. We get more from Bloomberg Law host June Grasso in New York.
During cross-examination, Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, tried to undermine Michael Cohen's credibility, painting Cohen as a Trump-obsessed loyalist who was spurned by the former president and turned into a vengeful publicity hound, making millions of dollars from books, podcasts, and merchandise sales, all devoted to condemning Trump. Cohen's cross-examination will continue on Thursday. He will be the final witness in the prosecution's case. In New York, June Grasso, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, June, thank you. Now to the latest developments in the war in Ukraine. Bloomberg News has learned the Biden administration is working to send an additional Patriot air defense battery to Kiev. The U.S. and its allies have been scrambling to meet Ukraine's demands for more weapons against an intensified Russian assault. Meanwhile, during his visit to Kiev, Secretary of State Antony Blinken played along with a local band on Neil Young's Rockin' in the Free World. Secretary Blinken told the bar crowd he knows it is a difficult time for Ukraine, but he said the United States and so much of the world are with them.
Well, Nathan, geopolitical tensions between the U.S. and China also remain front and center. A day after President Biden announced increased tariffs on China, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is indicating he wants to spend billions on technology to challenge China and other rivals. We get the details from Bloomberg's Steve Potusk in Washington.
According to a 30-page policy blueprint from a bipartisan group of senators, the U.S. needs to shield Americans from the risks posed by artificial intelligence. They advocate promoting the emerging technology with at least $32 billion in annual government spending. U.S. companies currently hold the global lead, yet China's race to develop highly advanced systems is putting pressure on lawmakers to craft a more lasting approach. Challenging China over economic and national security has been a rare area of common ground ground for lawmakers. A new law that passed with wide bipartisan support requires TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance to sell the popular video sharing app or face a ban in the U.S. In Washington, Steve Potusk, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, Steve, thank you. Meanwhile, China is said to be considering a proposal that would have local governments buy millions of unsold homes. We get more from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
The State Council is said to be seeking feedback from the provinces on the plan. If this course is taken, it would be one of the most ambitious attempts yet to fix the property downturn. Sources say local state-owned enterprises would be asked to buy the homes from distressed developers. This would be done at steep discounts, and it would be aided by loans from state banks. Many of the properties would then be converted into affordable housing. Details still being debated. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Brian, thanks. Well, turning to markets now, shares of GameStop and AMC Entertainment are among the most active in the pre-market as we enter another round of the meme stock craze. And we get more from Bloomberg's John Tucker. John.
And Karen, GameStop has picked up more than $11 billion in market value this month, while AMC has gained some $1.2 billion. The trading volume has soared this week for both of the stocks, with hundreds of millions of shares exchanging hands over the past couple of days. However, the value of those shares traded for both stocks, that does remain far below the levels seen 3 years ago. This latest rally erupted on Monday following the return to social media of Keith Gill, who drove the meme stock mania of 2021 under the moniker Roaring Kitty. Even former bond king Bill Gross has gotten in on the action. His strategy centers on selling what he describes as 400% annualized volatility. AMC Entertainment shares in the pre-market up 7%. GameStop also up 8% right now. John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. House Speaker Mike Johnson says the House will be moving ahead with a vote on a measure that would force the White House to resume the transfer of certain weapons to Israel. This comes after President Biden last week paused the shipment of 2,000-pound bombs over concerns they be used in southern Gaza. However, the Biden administration notified Congress that it will be issuing more than $1 billion in new weapons deals to Israel. Speaker Johnson says, though, that the House will still vote on the Israel security assistance.
We'll have to see what effect it has on the legislation, but I think it's important for us to express again the will of Congress on the matter, and so I don't think we'll be changing what we do in the legislation.
Opening statements are scheduled to begin today in Senator Robert Menendez's corruption trial in Manhattan. The New Jersey Democrat is charged with taking bribes, including gold bars, cash, and a Mercedes, to help send aid and weapons to Egypt and Qatar. Days after the release of a scathing report detailing a toxic workplace culture, the head of the FDIC has apologized again and is preparing to face lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
The report details a culture of widespread sexual harassment and discrimination at the FDIC. Chairman Martin Grunberg is vowing to overhaul the agency's culture and is resisting calls to step down. He's scheduled to appear before the House Financial Services Committee today, where he is expected to apologize again for the harassment and abuse that employees endured and explain the changes that he says he and his office are already making. Republicans are demanding his resignation in light of the Biden administration's zero-tolerance policy for workplace bullying. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Finally, the top prize at the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show was awarded last night.
The Best in Show winner at the 148th Annual Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show is the miniature poodle.
Sage bested 6 other finalists. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Knicks and Pacers Game 5. Just 2 days after Indiana won Game 4 by 34. Same players, but a different arena. At the Garden this time, the Knicks won by 30, 121-91. And for Jalen Brunson, that's more like it. Played very much like the guy who previously had 4 straight 40-point playoff games. Brunson went for 44-28 in the first half.
It was big time, and they played really well back in Indiana, put us on our heels, and just we needed to respond. And so just doing what we do and sticking to our values, our core principles, and just doing the things that we do that help us be successful.
Brunson had help as Josh Hart, Deuce McBride, and Alec Burks all scored 17 or 18 points. Knicks plus 24 rebounding. Isaiah Hartenstein, 12 offensive boards. Knicks now up 3-2. Game 6 Friday at Indiana. Denver was down 2-0, won their third straight for Minnesota, 112-97. Nikola Jokic scored 40. The Bruins stay alive. Their goalie Jeremy Swayman pulled a Mark Messier guaranteed victory in Game 5, and he made a game-saving stop with 8 seconds left in a 2-1 win at Florida. High drama in Western Canada. A minute after Vancouver tied the game, Edmonton scored with 39 seconds left to win 3-2. The WNBA debut of Caitlin Clark, not great. Struggled to score early, had 10 turnovers. Indiana lost by 21. The Liberty won their opener in Washington. Yankees beat the Twins 5-1. 13 Yankee hits, including a Giancarlo Stanton homer and Alex Verdugo 2-run double. Mets had only 4 hits off Aaron Nola, lost to the Phillies 4-0. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Karen, Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager. We want to turn now to a conversation with the founder and CEO of Citadel, Ken Griffin, from the Qatar Economic Forum, powered by Bloomberg. In a wide-ranging interview with Bloomberg's Eric Schatzker, Griffin weighed in on key economic and political issues, from geopolitical tensions to America's place on the world stage, the 2024 presidential election, and both candidates' economic policies. Let's go to part of that discussion.
It's sort of a continuation of the incoherent economic policies of the Biden administration. We've seen this giant push towards green energy over the course of the last several years, and at the same time, a set of policies that run completely contrary to the stated goal of trying to head towards a zero-carbon world, and placing enormous tariffs on Chinese EVs, which are low-cost, high-quality, of great value to American consumers, is yet another part of the incoherent Biden economic strategy. The other part of the strategy that I scratch my head about is the U.S. refusing to provide new LNG permits. Right? If you want the world to head towards a lower carbon footprint and move away from coal, access to LNG is a really important part of the equation. And yet the United States is refusing to permit new facilities in the foreseeable future.
Ken, Qatar is playing an instrumental role in the peace talks, or the effort to create peace, as it were, between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and to resolve the situation in Gaza. And with respect to Hamas, you've been outspoken about the pro-Palestinian protests back in the United States. They've roiled university campuses. You've been particularly critical of your alma mater, Harvard. Here's my question to you. When people here in the Gulf region, and across the globe for that matter, see the chaos at Harvard or Columbia or USC or MIT, and police in combat gear moving to clear encampments, how do you think that shapes their view of America?
Not well. Not well. And what is lost is that what's happening on campus is not free speech, it's anarchy. You know, at Columbia, when they storm a building, they vandalize a building, they're destroying property, and then they ask for humanitarian aid, which is the greatest of all ironies. It's just the wrong dynamic that we're seeing take place on American campuses. These are students, most of these students on campuses are trying to learn, they're trying to have an education, and the universities should be really trying to encourage a constructive debate between the students of different backgrounds, whether they're from the Middle East, whether they're of Jewish origin. It's really important that the generation that will be the generation that runs the world in 40 years tries to learn from this horrible moment in history. And we're not fostering that environment on campuses today. And it's a huge, huge disappointment that so much of what we see on campus, you've seen the video footage of the kids interviewed. Why are you here? What are you protesting about? Often they can't even answer basic questions about what's happening in the region and why it's taking place.
Ken, people here, and I suspect those watching us around the world, are eager for your insights into what might happen during and after the U.S. election. How might U.S. foreign policy and defense policy change if Donald Trump were to return to the White House?
So if President Trump returns to the White House, I think you'll see a global perception of a stronger America. Now, the Biden administration's foreign policies, the actual policies, are generally speaking thoughtful. But to be blunt, America does not exude credibility or strength in its actions around the world today. Our positioning does not match the thoughtfulness of our policies. That's a very difficult place to be in a world which has the geopolitical cross currents that we spoke about earlier. And it means that those who are willing to push to see how far you can push America are willing to push harder than we want to see happening. And I think that anybody who knows President Trump knows that is not somebody you just push to see what's going to happen. That's the wrong strategy with President Trump. And so I believe that President Trump will have very good people in foreign policy and in the Department of Defense. But I think he will exude a level of strength that will help to stabilize the world in this very, very trying times.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.